Welcome to the A to Z of Talent with your hosts, Andrea Kirby and Zishan Lim.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the A to Z of Talent. Our podcast is all about finding the space to challenge what's going on in recruitment, attraction, talent development. And today we are looking at the impact of AI on early careers and graduate development, and also the evolution of assessment. And with me, of course, is my very handsome podcast host, Zishan Lim. Hi, Z.
Morning, all. Thank you for joining us today, and a big welcome to Lou Zoanetti. From Brightworks, I should say, and on a topic that we can all easily fire up on. So I'm very excited to have today's chat. So Lou's background is 10 years experience deep diving into all aspects of graduate and internship world. The strategic thinker working across the end-to-end grad life cycle. And through her companies, Lou has been able to create innovative ways to connect the right students to the right organizations, and having experience, getting that transition from university placements through to positions into large corporates as well, right? And it's a space that I'm very passionate about. I think there are a lot of misnomers in this space as well. So Lou, let's kick things off. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how Brightworks is responding to the huge changes with early careers?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, welcome. And welcome to the podcast, says me, who's the guest. But yeah, thanks so much for the warm welcome, I should say. It's lovely to be here. That's a big question to start, Z, because to talk about my journey, just really briefly, I'm the CEO of Brightworks. As Z's already said, we're an early careers consultancy that support organisations with their grad and internship programs. And I started in this space 16 years ago. So my prior life, I was in PR and communications, and I was working at NAB in that space for a number of years before I was asked to work on the graduate program at NAB, which I did for 5 years. And then I went into the university sector to work for Monash University to head up internships at Monash, which was a great opportunity to see how unis were preparing students for the world of work. And then in 2019, I set up my own practice and eventually set up Brightworks. So yeah, it's been a really good experience to have both as a hirer of grads and someone who ran a large graduate development program, one of the biggest in Australia at NAB, and then go into the uni sector, and then finally to start my own business to really help organisations tap into this next generation of talent that are coming out of university. And boy, is the world changing as they're coming out. I know we're going to talk a lot about the impacts of AI specifically on the early careers market, but my business Brightworks has really tried to be at the forefront of the changes that are coming out, the technology that is coming out that actually can help us do our jobs even more efficiently and in an even more consistent way. We were early adopters of AI at Brightworks, and we certainly were early in encouraging the industry to come on board with the benefits of AI, and certainly educating themselves around how the students and graduates might be using it and how they might need to be trained in it as they come into the workplace. So yeah, it's super exciting time. It's obviously a disruptive time in the industry, and I'm really pleased to be here to talk all things early careers.
So Lou, I sent you and Z a post this morning from Omar Molad from Vervo. Obviously, people that do assessment in grad spaces and those sorts of things will be having a bit of a panic, because it looks like AI is predicted to replace about 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs in 5 years, particularly in things like law and finance and tech. And indeed, in the HR world, we've started having this conversation that the graduates come up through a certain career path, and all of that will be replaced by automation and AI. And Omar goes on to sort of say that we've lost sight of what graduate hiring is all about. We don't bring grads in to help stuff. We actually bring them in so they can be developed relatively cheaply into experienced operators of tomorrow. So and also we're seeing that 11% of grads are changing their jobs because of HI or the threat of AI. So what do you think the implications are of this shift for how we recruit and develop grads, and what are the key skills that grads are going to need to survive and thrive?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge question because of the huge impact that AI is going to have and is going to have on the graduate recruitment market. We've already seen it in Australia. This year, we're starting to see graduate hiring numbers reduce. And we're definitely all seeing the articles come out of the US and the UK around the big four organisations either opting to not hire early careers talent at all or reducing numbers. I've certainly seen articles as well from CEOs of major tech corporations out of the US saying that no new role will be, approved without the organisation proving that it can't be done by AI. So this is worrying times in terms of just general workforce development, general hiring, but none so much as grads who, I think for a lot of organisations where the graduate program has been a resourcing-based program, not a talent program necessarily, just resources, bums on seats doing the grunt work. AI is going to have a huge impact because of the efficiencies and the technology that it can bring into an organisation. And where I see that, particularly individuals who are early careers talent, but organisations that help support their grads to understand how to harness their technology and actually be experts in the technology themselves are the ones where I think they're going to set up their early career programs for success, because they're going to ensure that the talent that they're bringing in are really well trained in how to use these skills to become, or this technology to become more efficient in their roles and actually take on more, the more human aspects that can't be automated through Gen AI. But yeah, it is a worrying time. I think it is going to have a big impact. And really my encouragement, like the post you sent from Omar, is really to say to organisations, well, if you're running an early careers program that is probably costing your business millions of dollars each year to run that program in salaries, recruitment costs, development costs, et cetera, we really need you to continue to do that. And your business needs you to continue to do that, because if you don't hire them now and train them up in your organisation, train them to be good employees and to do what you need to do, if you don't hire that early careers talent, you don't have anyone sitting on the bench in 5 to 10 years' time when you actually need people to do the work of a that kind of middle management level that we're training grads to go into quite quickly and then into senior management. And so it just gives you, it just will mean that you have a big gap in your workforce where you haven't built the talent that you might need for future years. So I'm really trying to encourage organisations not to turn the lights off on their grad programs. Yes, to reassess the numbers of people that they're hiring, but also to consider the types of tasks they're asking their grads to do so they can be used in a more efficient and a way that really reflects the amount of expense that's being put into hiring these people in the first place.
There's a whole lot of people, and we talked about this actually last week with Annie Johnson, who is a huge AI advocate, but definitely a human first advocate. And there's so many people getting so excited about what AI can do, but we're forgetting about these sorts of things. There's a fundamental shift in the way people start work. And I ran a graduate program in a law firm, and yes, it was all about learning how to draft something and supporting partners, and all of that can be done by AI, but it was all the other important stuff about how they go to client meetings and how they ask the right questions and how they give advice and are seen as being credible. and it just isn't something that you pick up necessarily unless you're being coached and mentored by senior people.
I think the other example would be that we know that we don't need pilots necessarily to drive planes. That can be done by automation. That's been autopilot has been a thing for a long time. Don't ask me how long. But there's something about a human element where we need someone to be at the front of the plane. And so even though these things could fly on their own and often do with a person sitting right there, we're not comfortable with just a computer driving that or flying that particular plane, same as we start to get into driverless cars. And I would say it's the same thing. It's like, where are the elements of the human experience, the human person that we need in our work, in the client work that we do, or in the work that we do internally, where you actually need a human there, not just because of the skills and the technical experience they have, but also because they can provide the right response in that moment because of the experiences that they've brought along to that particular conversation or that particular situation. It means that they're there ready to respond to, the needs of that particular time. So, yeah, I think it's quite interesting. We have kind of, as a society, not wanted to fully embrace technology when we've been given opportunity where there's risk, or we associate their risk. And so I think this is quite prevalent now in early careers.
Yeah.
I think you've raised a couple of really interesting points as well, Lou, in your answer before. And, I'll say the three of them first so that we've got our three bullet points. And maybe if you wanted to jump into any of these in more detail as well. But really, the first one is there are actually two types of graduate roles, right? There are ones which are the bums on seats, where we need to get grunt work done, which is the majority of the roles, if we think about it, right? I did get into a graduate program, but not everyone does, right? And the second type of grad role is the formal graduate program when you get the rotations, and it's really, a little bit more of a fast track than your traditional entry-level role. Both of those, I think, impacted a little bit differently by AI and, changes to the world of work. That's the first point. Second point is pipelines. You mentioned, in 5 to 10 years' time, there aren't going to be the skills to have in the middle management layers. And we've seen this many, many times over and over again. I started out as a accounting and finance recruiter, right? And I remember my director, Mark Smith, telling me I was recruiting. I started my desk during the GFC. So you can imagine how fun that was. But I remember Mark was telling me, every time there's a downturn, the big firms, they cut the graduate intake so that when that downturn is finished and the economy is good again, they actually have no one in the manager level ready to take on the manager jobs in your big accounting firms. And we see this time and time again, always happens. And in the AI case, I think it's going to be even more prevalent. But it seems like people have forgotten these lessons that we see through the economic cycles. The third one is my most hated phrase in the world, which is job-ready graduates. And you've worked in the university sector, you've worked in the corporate sector as well. And, are we really just misaligning the whole university system, trying to shoehorn people into being job ready when really university should be a lot more than that, right? It's not just about getting the first job, it's actually setting you up for the rest of your career. Three huge points there. Totally not what I've got in front of me in terms of what we should be talking about, but I think it's things that we really need to dig into a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the university component, that last point you raised, having worked in the university system and worked in internships in the university system, I think that it depends on the type of degree that you undertake as to whether you're going to university to experience university. And because it's if you're lucky enough to go to university, or if that's what you choose to do, for some people, it's just that stop between school and adult, or work or whatever that might be. It's kind of like the next natural step particularly if you come from a family where that's part of the culture to go to university of your family. But, Gen Z are the most educated generation on the planet. About 50% of them have degrees. It's a highly educated group of people. And I think that a lot of grads do go to university, yes, as a stopgap, yes, as the next step. But depending on the type of degree they do, they're also going because they want a job. And so there is this tension because some people are doing it because it's the next step and they're not quite sure and they want to figure that out while they're studying. But for a lot of people that do more, I'd say more vocational type degrees, whether that's, nursing, medicine, even like business, those sorts of degrees, they really go in and their outcome is, I want a job at the end of this. And so the university experience, you can understand why it's tailored to that. So when I was at Monash University, the business internships were absolutely huge. We did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds a year. And the competition for students to get those internships was extremely high. At the same time, I also ran internships for the arts faculty. And we had heaps of internships for them to do. We had these employers knocking on our door, please, we want them to come and do these internships. But the students themselves and the academic staff were discouraging them, or it wasn't part of the path of that uni experience to want to experience work while studying. So, it really depends on what discipline you're going into and whether the job is the outcome or just being a good human or, having an experience where you figure the next step out is the outcome for you. Yeah.
So one of the things then to tie back into here is what responsibility do companies have in training the junior workforce and finding a new way of delivering on that. And you definitely do some training on having grads understand AI. You have some good development programs there. So I'd love you to talk a bit about those. But how can companies still offer a purposeful development and career progression, even as potentially some of these traditional junior roles are disappearing? So how do we've given them a degree, how do we now as companies develop our grads?
Yeah, and we've seen a huge change in this. Like when I started in the industry 16 years ago, the readiness of grads for work compared to the readiness of grads for work now, it is very different. And we are seeing impacts of COVID on graduates' abilities, particularly in interpersonal communications, abilities to focus at work. It's very difficult to get graduates, particularly when we're running graduate development programs where it's online. It's very difficult to get them to focus for that short period of time that workshop goes for. And we're definitely seeing the impacts of shortened attention spans. Obviously, use of AI has been great, but also we encourage organisations to really think, how are they teaching graduates critical thinking skills? Because we know that AI is a confident bullshitter. A lot of the time we do need to sense check what's coming out of that. So how do we build confidence that, people are making really robust decisions and they're thinking about things critically? I think that as someone who's been in the grad industry a long time, when I first started, there were 5 key things that organisations, mainly the development program, was focused on: communication, resilience, leadership, teamwork, and problem solving kind of things. They were the 5 things. And then over time, we've had, World Economic Forum come out with some new skills, 2025 job skills, which would include like digital literacy, creativity. We started to see some new language come out. A lot of grad development programs actually still need to focus on those core capabilities, because that is something that we all need to develop as humans working, is how do we work with others? How do we solve problems? How do we communicate effectively? How are we resilient in the face of change? And there is a lot of change in organisations. And, how can we develop our leadership potential as an individual, even if we never lead a person or, but certainly to lead work, and certainly play a leadership role as an individual contributor or as a people leader. These skills have always been the foundation of graduate development. What I've seen particularly since I started Brightworks, is there's a bigger desire for some of these other skills around yes, like I said, critical thinking, creativity, problem solving that's more complex, so more human-centered design, or like design thinking. We, as you said, we have developed an AI for productivity course to teach graduates how to use AI safely and effectively. And I think those things are going to continue as organisations become more sophisticated in what they're looking for from their employees. And bearing in mind that it's not just the workshops that's the component of the graduate development program. The more important part is actually the program experience, and really making sure that if you're bringing in a group of early careers talent into your organisation and you're making that investment, and I hope you continue to do so, you really think about what are the roles you need them to go into in 3 to 5 years' time, and what are the critical experiences they need to have to be ready for that role, so that you can design your graduate development program with work experiences or rotations or secondments or job shadowing, which allows them to build those key capabilities or competencies to be ready for that role when it comes up. A lot of grad programs I see don't have a lot of structure other than it's, they do a rotation. But if I asked leaders of grad programs, well, why are they doing that rotation over this one? It's like, oh, just because that's what we've always done. And it's like, well, actually, if you want them to go into X role at the end, these are probably the critical skills they need to develop to be ready for that. So thinking strategically about what that program experience looks like from a work experience, what additional development do they need from a workshop perspective. We also do a lot of work with people leaders of grads. We have 5 different topics of workshops we run with people leaders to help them get the most out of early careers talent. And then the final piece is, of course, mentoring. How do you create structured mentoring programs for graduates so they've got people to, bounce ideas off, try new things, someone who's not their manager day to day that they can sort of learn from as well. So, yeah, it's quite, if you have a program, you can creating structure and, I guess, strategy, critical strategy around why you're doing certain things is where we really need people to go, because when we look at graduate talent, they're not ready coming out of university at the moment. They're really not ready for work in the majority of cases.
I think we saw that during COVID. I still remember someone posting, or I heard about, the graduate that was turning up to meetings still in their pajamas. So there was a whole lot of stuff through COVID, and, now with a lot more remote work around the etiquette of work and how you have to show up. So it seems like grads are learning a lot in this new world that we're building.
So just to add one point as well, the other thing... I was just going to say the other thing we can't forget is that grads have less financial responsibility than previous generations have had at the same time, because so many more people still live at home. And so because the housing market is what the housing market is in terms of rental affordability and availability, and also Gen Z being a generation that, one of their key stresses is that they will never buy a home. The percentage that acknowledge that that's not what they're aspiring to because they just don't think it's achievable. The impact of that in work is when previous generations, when work has got hard, they've dug their nails in because they had to keep working because they had to pay rent or a mortgage, or they were getting married, or they had children. And that tenacity that we saw, or grit of doing things when we're uncomfortable, we just had to do it because we had the financial responsibilities that meant we couldn't back out. Whereas what we're seeing now with grads, and this is very, systemic across the industry, is when it gets difficult, and it does get difficult because anytime we're uncomfortable, it feels awful. And every time we do something new, it's uncomfortable. When it gets difficult, there's a percentage of grads who do not have the grit to withstand that, and they will walk away from that opportunity. And that not only that has an impact on employers, but for that individual to then come back into the workforce is so much more difficult for them, because they've now gone from employment into unemployment and maybe working at a level that's lower than the graduate program that they've got into. So yeah, it's going to have a huge impact, the lack of financial responsibility that people have. Not for lack of wanting it, just because of the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
I was going to say, sorry, Z and we've got some delay happening.
And I think it's really interesting.
There's a massive rainstorm in Sydney, and we've
Yes.
got a delay with Z. So speak, Z.
All right, thank you. I really like that point, Lou, because grads are paid the highest that they've ever been paid in general. Not in every situation, but in general, partially because of inflation, but also, I saw this morning one organization's offering 250,000 for graduate roles, right? Which is more money than I make. And I have 2 businesses. So, it's insane.
I know, it's heartbreaking.
But at the same time, they don't even need the money as well. I mean, everyone needs money, but, do you need 250K? Maybe not, right? So that was a super interesting point just then. And also interesting that, we have probably gone backwards because of COVID, interpersonal skills and everything else, plus the technology, mobile phone technology in general, which has been something I've been reading all year about, social media and that kind of thing, and the impact that has been having on people in general, but especially the young people. It's surprising, but not surprising that we've gone backwards since 2019, let's say. But the grit bit, I think, is really important, right? Because that's where you get stretched. And when you get stretched is where you grow and you learn and you actually develop skills, right? Every bad experience is actually preparing you for something useful later on. But if you escape all the bad experiences, then you're actually not prepared for anything hard down the track, right? So I think that was a really, really important point that you brought up.
Yeah, and I think the investment in that. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the investment in the development with the economic situation that Australia's been in for the last 2 years, I've definitely seen a reduction in the amount of spend on graduate development for organisations, and that has an impact. We've got a generation that are less ready for work than previous. We've talked about the impacts of COVID. And then we've got organisations who are spending less. They're pulling back investment in training development of those individuals when they need it more. And the impact of that is financial, because for organisations, particularly in consulting situations, it means that the rate of utilisation or the speed to competency is much longer than it has been previously. So certainly I have seen in the industry, the management consulting firms, whereby it used to have a ramp up of maybe 6 weeks to client work of, to the utilisation expectation. It's now 12 weeks. And so this has a financial implication, even if you're not a organisation that is a consulting firm where you are going out to clients. Just the speed of competency is much longer. And so what we really need organisations to do is to really think about the investment they're making in learning and development, and to consider, what do they need to do? What do they need to give people to set them up for success as quickly as possible, so they can be delivering and achieving things for your business in the same period of time as they've been able to do previously. And so that requires investment. And when organisations are strapped for cash, grads are the first thing that gets impacted, and they need it more than ever. So we've developed a program, a smaller program called Grad Academy for companies that are, have smaller cohort numbers, because we were finding those organisations where they weren't taking on as many grads, they also were just stopping their development completely. And so we've developed a program whereby you can buy a place on our development program and we'll run it centrally for them. So that's been a good outcome for organisations where they still want to invest, but they just can't hire companies like us just, completely to run a graduate development for their organisation, but they can buy a place on our graduate development program. So yeah, just ways that we're trying to adjust to make it easier for companies to access development services.
That's a really lovely cross-functional training program then, because a grad could be sitting with someone who's working in finance and someone who's working in consulting or tech. So what a lovely, fantastic learning program that would be.
Yeah, we're hoping it will have, where the first cohort is starting in August. And the program focuses on core development that we run with our, top tier clients that they can afford to bring us in to run for them. So it focuses on developing the grads through 3 workshops, and they get to meet each other from other businesses. And then we also run a mentoring program as well. And so that means that they get to practice what they're learning in the workshops as well, and have a formal mentoring program with conversation guides along the way as well. So not just mentoring where we introduce them and leave them to it, but we find that when we have conversation guides for each interaction, it helps them stay on task and helps them practice what they're learning at work and in the workshops. So
that would have been golden when I was running the law firm, because part of what we developed was how they create their own network, so that down the track, when they're looking for work, they can go back to their network. And you've got a ready built one in there for lawyers and consultants.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm not sure if Z's going to say something here. So look, so we've talked a lot about how roles are changing, and that we need to rethink how potentially we then hire. And if the skills employers are needing are changing, it needs to follow that our assessments need to change as well. The survey found that 68% of grads felt traditional assessments didn't show their full potential. And that's a pretty strong case, I think, for doing something differently. Now, you've actually partnered with an assessment provider called TopScore for digital assessment centres. So what makes what you're doing in terms of assessing graduates different, and what's exciting about it?
Yeah, it's an exciting partnership. We've been working with TopScore for 3 years, and we've now become their official partner in the Australian region. So that's super exciting for us. Really, we were looking for an alternative to Teams and Zoom that was being used for graduate assessment centres during COVID, and as we moved to the remote workplace or more remote work. And digital assessment centres are a great way of selecting candidates or, assessing candidates because of the equity that they provide to people. It means that you don't have to fly to a particular location to be considered. It means that our regional and remote graduates can be considered for opportunities, and they don't have to self-fund themselves getting to a graduate assessment centre in a major city, which is most often, in most cases, not funded by the organisation. It also means that for a cohort of people who like things to be tailored, they like things to be immediate, they like feedback immediately, they like things to, take as little time as it possibly can. We've got little patience these days. It means that they can attend an assessment centre, and there's a start and end it might be a 3-hour assessment centre, and they can go off to a shift at work that afternoon. So rather than coming in face to face, it means that they haven't lost their whole day in that experience. And what we're finding with our clients that we run digital assessment centres with, the rate of people actually attending those is much, much higher than when we run them face to face. And then from an assessor point of view, from a workplace point of view, it means that assessors are spending less time in assessment activities because it's highly curated to where they need to be at that particular time, and the time is shortened. From an accessibility point of view, the benefit of TopScore, and the one thing that we were really focused on, is the accessibility tools. So they've got, the ability to have adjust the size of text, to change font so that it's, all of the things. So you can use a screen reader. So if you're vision impaired, you've got access. The ability for it to adjust and adapt to people's needs was something that was very important. And so, we're really excited to be working with TopScore on that particular product. It's also like all in one. So it means that there's no data entry mistakes. All of the assessments done on the platform, all the videos are on the platform, all the interviews are on the platform, everything's in there. So when people are submitting scores, it goes up to a dashboard and makes it much easier to assess candidates. And I think just beyond TopScore, as an organisation, we've been very focused on positive candidate experiences. So many people that work at Brightworks used to be grad program managers, teachers, works in the university. We know how important these processes are to give people the hints and tips that they need along the recruitment process to be successful. We want people to put their best foot forward. We've kind of moved away from a recruitment or selection process. It's like, well, we don't care if you don't get in. We've got so many candidates, like it doesn't matter. And so we're really focused on, what tips and hints can we give you along the way? How can you best prepare? And how do we give really good individualized feedback at the end of the process so that you actually learn about why you haven't been successful for a particular program? Because more often than not, you never find out. And we also have a particular focus on neurodivergent candidates. So we use specialised testing, and obviously we have TopScore that also supports neurodivergent candidates, super important to our business. And also because we know so many Gen Z talent know that they are neurodivergent, which is wonderful. We've had a lot of generations that previously didn't know that they were neurodivergent until very late in life. So it's really nice to be able to work with a cohort of people who, we can support them because they know that they're neurodivergent and they might need to do an assessment in a different way. So that's really a nice positive thing we can contribute to the industry too.
It's really good. It actually sounds so much more efficient than the old paper and pen writing notes during the assessment center and then sitting around a table for an hour or two after each assessment center to try to collate the scores. Like when I used to run a few of the graduate programs a while back now. Now, Lou, we are almost out of time. One last question for you. If there is one thing that you could change about how we attract and develop graduate talent in this era of AI, what would it be?
Oh, look, can I have one for attract and one for develop? So in the attraction and selection process, I would love it if we could move to a model where people could actually show the skills that they have rather than just relying on people's articulation skills. A lot of grad recruitment is very biased towards people who are confident about speaking about their experiences, of course, because we rely on people to articulate those skills, either verbally in a video interview or in a group assessment centre, any sort of opportunity where we can get people to showcase their skills. If there are any graduates listening to this, please don't use ChatGPT for your application. Not because I don't want you to use it. It's just because everyone is so the same. There's nothing different. You all sound the same. There's nothing that's standing out. And actually, as a grad industry, we're seeing a movement back to cover letters, which I thought we would never happen yet because all the CVs are exactly the same. And so cover letters are coming back in. Obviously, those robust selection processes like testing and video interviews and assessment centres are still there to help with volume. But we're really wanting to see personality as part of the process. So that's attraction. And then from a development point of view, I think that we have a responsibility to actually teach AI skills in the workplace, whether that's for your early careers talent or not. With organisations that have AI tools, a lot of them are teaching people how to use them, which is fantastic. I've spoken to a lot of grad leaders this year who are not allowed to use AI in their organisations. And let me tell you, grads are using it anyway. If you say to them, you cannot use it, they are using it on their phone. They are using it on their personal device and they're just emailing it to themselves. They are going to be using it anyway. So it's really important that organisations wise up to that fact that people are going to want to use things that are going to make them more efficient, of course. And if we know that, we need to teach people how to use it safely, how to think about things critically when they come out, and how to use it in the most effective way that's not just a prompt like, help me write this better. AI is such a wonderful tool when used really well. So I'd really encourage organisations to think about the training they're providing. Because grads expect it. 50% of grads that we surveyed last year in our student pulse said that they expect their employer to teach them how to use AI. So it's not like they're coming ready-made with that. And I think a lot of employers think, well, they're grads, they're good at tech, they're Gen Z. When it comes to AI, they actually want to be formally taught as part of their graduate development. So that's my 2 pieces of advice.
Absolutely brilliant. And again, what I love so far, Z, is that all the people we've had on talking about AI is very much this human first approach. I am getting really tired of all of these people talking about the brilliance of AI without thinking about the impact it's going to have on people and society as a whole. So I love a human first approach to graduates, and those dear little young people coming out into the workforce. I do sound like a 60-year-old woman now, so
but we do have a responsibility. Like, we want our young people to get jobs. You know, we really do as a society. Even if you're running a business and you want to automate the whole thing, that's great. But as a society, we need our young people to have jobs. We need to build their confidence. We need to give them hope in their future. And it's very much a circle of despair. That's exactly right. We've got an aging population. About 4 million people are going to leave the Australian workforce in the next 4 years due to age. We need to be bringing young people in.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, Lou, thank you so much for your time today, and sorry about the tech issues. It's pouring with rain here in Melbourne and in Sydney, and there's some internet connections just going a bit skew-if. So, Z, always lovely to have you with me on this podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you.
Lou, thank you for your time, and I hope both grads and graduate and CEOs and everyone listens to this. Our podcast in 2 weeks is going to be talking with Nathan, and I've gone blank on his surname, and he works for Yarra Valley Council, and he's going to be talking to us about hiring in councils, but also why they were one of the finalists in the Candidate Experience Awards. Most unusual to see a council in. So folks, tune in again with us in 2 weeks' time. And thank you very much for listening to the A to Z of Talent. Bye for now.
Thank you. See you all.